She crawled under a Mafia boss's table, shaking, bleeding, whispering, "Please, don't tell him I'm here." Seconds later, her violent ex stormed in, eyes scanning every booth like a predator sniffing blood. And when his gaze locked on the man hiding her, the entire diner froze because no one lies to Derek Cawley and walks out alive. If you're hooked in and want to enjoy this story, go ahead and subscribe, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see where everyone's watching. Plus, tomorrow I've got another incredible story lined up, and you definitely don't want to miss it. Alright, back to the story. The espresso in Derek Cawley's cup had gone lukewarm the moment he heard the kitchen door crash open like a bone breaking. He didn't lift his eyes from the newspaper spread before him. After 15 years running one of the most disciplined crime families on the East Coast, he'd learned to read danger by instinct alone. This wasn't the tired shuffle of the late shift cook or the casual footsteps of a regular closing out their tab. This was terror. Through his peripheral vision, he caught movement, a blur of black and white uniform, too frantic, too low to be anyone walking normally. The figure moved like something fleeing a wildfire, all desperation and survival instinct. Then she was beneath his table. Derek's Italian leather boots had just enough clearance from the black and white checkered floor for a woman to press herself into the shadows. He felt trembling fingers wrap around his ankle, cold as winter steel, and a voice, raw, broken, rose from the darkness below. "Please, don't tell him I'm here." Across the booth, Vincent's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Beside him, Marco's hand drifted instinctively toward his waistband. All four of Derek's men went rigid, their low conversation evaporating into the neon-soaked air like steam. Derek slowly lowered his tattooed hand beneath the table. A small, shaking palm pressed against his ice, cold and slick with sweat. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice gravel and smoke, loud enough for his crew but gentle enough to anchor. "Nobody's telling anybody nothing." That's when the headlights cut through the rain-streaked windows. A pearl-white Escalade, the kind of vehicle that cost more than the diner made in 6 months, rolled into the parking lot with the predatory patience of a shark circling blood. The engine idled for 3 long seconds before shutting off with a mechanical growl. Then the door opened. Evan Russo didn't enter spaces, he infected them. He was tall, sharp-featured, with slicked-back dark hair that gleamed under the diner's fluorescent lights like polished obsidian. A tailored charcoal suit clung to his frame, more boardroom than backstreet, but the 2 men flanking him told a different story. Both wore dark jackets that bulged at the ribs. Both had eyes that swept the room like targeting systems. The diner, which had been buzzing with the comfortable hum of midnight stragglers and truckers nursing bottomless coffee, went silent. "Evening, folks." Evan's voice was silk over razors, the kind of smooth that came from closing deals and breaking people. His smile never reached his eyes as they scanned the booths, the counter, the exits. "I'm looking for someone. Young woman, mid-20s, Latina, probably scared out of her mind." He paused, letting the words hang like a noose. "She works here. Name's Tiffany. My girlfriend. She ran out during a misunderstanding." Behind the counter, Sally, the gray-haired waitress who'd been pouring Derek's coffee every Tuesday for the past decade, dried her hands slowly on her apron, her weathered face unreadable. Evan's gaze swept past her, past the truckers, past the elderly couple in the corner booth, and then it landed on Derek's table. Derek didn't flinch, didn't blink, just held Evan's stare with the kind of stillness that only comes from men who've looked death in the face and found it boring. "She's not here," Derek said flatly, his voice carrying the weight of finality. Evan's smile sharpened. "I wasn't asking you, friend. Wasn't offering either." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. One of Evan's men shifted his jacket, revealing the grip of a pistol. Vincent and Marco moved in sync, their chairs scraping back just enough to clear their own weapons. Sally cleared her throat, breaking the standoff. "Sir, I haven't seen any staff leave tonight. Maybe she went to another location?" Evan's jaw tightened. He wasn't stupid enough to start a gunfight in a public diner, but his eyes promised violence deferred, not denied. He pulled a business card from his pocket and placed it on the counter with surgical precision. "When you see her," he said, his gaze never leaving Derek, "tell her I'll be waiting, and I always collect what's mine." The words hung in the air like a curse. Evan turned, his men following like shadows, and walked out into the rain. The Escalade's engine roared to life, headlights sweeping across the windows one final time before disappearing into the night. Only then did Derek feel the grip on his ankle release. He leaned down, finding wide brown eyes staring up at him from beneath the table, terrified, exhausted, and framed by bruises that makeup couldn't quite hide. "If you stay," Derek said quietly, "you do it knowing one thing once I step in. There's no going back." Tiffany's voice was barely a whisper. "There's nothing to go back to." Derek nodded once. Then he stood, extending his hand into the shadows. "Then let's make sure he never finds you again." The diner emptied slowly, like water draining from a cracked basin. Rain softened against the windows. Derek's men positioned themselves strategically, Vincent by the door, Marco near the kitchen, 2 others watching the parking lot through cigarette smoke and silence. Tiffany sat in the corner booth, wrapped in a jacket that smelled like leather and gunpowder. Her hands trembled around a cup of coffee she couldn't bring herself to drink. Every headlight that passed made her flinch. Derek slid into the seat across from her, moving with the careful deliberation of someone who understood that predators and prey spoke different languages. He didn't ask if she was okay. The question would have been an insult to her intelligence. What did Evan want? His voice was low, stripped of everything except necessity. Tiffany's fingers tightened around the mug. "He thinks I stole from him." "Did you?" She met his eyes then, and Derek saw something that surprised him. Not fear, not anymore. Defiance. "Yes." The word hung between them like a lit match near gasoline. Tiffany reached into her apron with shaking hands, finding the small tear she'd sewn herself 3 nights ago. Her fingers worked the stitching loose until she pulled out a tiny object wrapped in electrical tape, a flash drive no bigger than her thumb. She placed it on the table between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Derek studied it, then her. "You risked your life for that? Because what's on it can destroy him." Her voice cracked, years of buried rage bleeding through. "Everything. Every transaction, every name, every girl he—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "I was his bookkeeper. I saw things no one was supposed to see. And when I tried to leave the first time, he said he'd kill me. Said no one would believe a waitress over a successful businessman." Derek's jaw tightened imperceptibly. He'd heard versions of this story before, different faces. Same script. Power, crushing those who couldn't fight back. Vincent appeared at his shoulder with a laptop, placing it silently on the table before retreating. Derek plugged in the drive, his tattooed fingers moving across the keyboard with surprising precision. The files opened like Pandora's box. Encrypted folders labeled with dates and locations, offshore accounts in the Caymans, shipping manifests that listed textiles but showed timestamps matching known trafficking routes, and named city councilmen, district attorneys, 2 sitting judges. Derek's expression didn't change, but Tiffany watched his knuckles go white against the table's edge. "How long were you with him?" Derek asked quietly. 3 years. The first 6 months, he was perfect. Flowers, dinners, promises. Her laugh was bitter and hollow. Then the first time I questioned him about a discrepancy in the books, he locked me in his office for 2 days. No food, no water, just him, explaining very carefully how much I owed him for the life he'd given me. Derek's eyes lifted from the screen. "In the neon light, they looked like winter ice. The bruises on your wrists," he said. "Those fresh?" She pulled her sleeves down instinctively. "He got angry when I tried to access his private files. I told him I was just organizing. He didn't believe me." She paused, her voice dropping to something barely audible. "He never believes me." Derek closed the laptop with controlled precision. He leaned back, studying her with the intensity of someone solving an equation that didn't add up. "You understand what you're holding, right? This isn't just dirt on a bad boyfriend. These names," he gestured at the laptop, "half of them have connections to organizations I've spent years keeping clean distance from. You go after Evan, you're going after an entire network. I know. They'll kill you for this. Not quick either. I know that too." Tiffany's voice steadied, finding strength in the decision she'd already made. "But I can't keep being afraid. I can't keep letting him own my life." She looked directly at Derek. "I came here because I had nowhere else to go. But if you're telling me to leave, I'm not." Derek's interruption was immediate and absolute. "I'm telling you that once we start this, it's war. And war costs more than you think you're willing to pay." Tiffany's eyes glistened, but no tears fell. "He already took everything. What's left to lose?" Derek saw it then, the same look he'd worn 20 years ago, when he decided violence was the only language left to speak. The look of someone who'd been pushed past fear into something far more dangerous, purpose. He stood, sliding the laptop under his arm. "You'll stay at my place tonight. Security's better. Tomorrow, we start breaking down these files. Every name, every transaction. Why are you helping me? The question came out raw, genuine. Derek paused at the booth's edge, his back to her. Because no one helped me when I needed it, he said quietly. And I've spent 15 years wondering if I could have been different if someone had. Morning light broke through floor-to-ceiling windows like an interrogation lamp. Tiffany woke disoriented, wrapped in sheets that cost more than a month's wages, in a bedroom larger than her entire apartment had been. Derek's penthouse was all clean lines and expensive silence, the kind of place where even the air felt controlled. She found him in the kitchen, already dressed in dark jeans and a fitted black shirt, pouring coffee with the mechanical efficiency of ritual. He slid a mug across the marble counter without a word. "I'm not used to this," Tiffany admitted, her voice still rough with sleep. She gestured vaguely at the opulence surrounding them. "Any of this. You'll adjust." Derek's tone suggested it wasn't a comfort, just a fact. She sipped the coffee. It was perfect. Of course it was. The sound of footsteps announced Vincent before he appeared, a folder tucked under his arm. He nodded to Tiffany with something that might have been respect, then placed the folder in front of Derek. "Dug into Evan Russo's history like you asked. You're not gonna like it." Derek opened the folder. His expression remained neutral, but Tiffany watched his jaw muscle twitch once, twice. "What is it?" she asked. Derek was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of old graves being disturbed. "Evan worked for my family. 7 years ago. Low-level collections. Money movement. We trusted him with roots, contacts, names. What happened? He sold us out." Derek's fingers traced the edge of a photograph. Evan, younger, leaner, standing beside men Tiffany didn't recognize, fed information to the Kozlov organization. "3 of my men died in an ambush because of intel he provided. We never proved it, but I knew. Always knew." He looked up at Vincent. "He disappeared before we could handle it. Vanished into legitimate business. Changed his operation. Kept his head down. Until now," Vincent added grimly. "Turns out he's been building his own network. Using your old roots, your old contacts. He's been hiding in plain sight, using the trafficking operation as leverage to keep people quiet." Tiffany felt ice spread through her chest. "So when he found me 3 years ago, wasn't coincidence," Derek finished. "Men like Evan, they're strategic. You were young, smart, had bookkeeping experience. He needed someone he could control, someone to manage his finances without asking questions." The coffee in Tiffany's hand suddenly tasted like ash. "I was a tool, from the very beginning." Derek's eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw something behind the cold exterior: recognition, understanding born from shared experience. "We all were, at some point," he said quietly. Vincent cleared his throat. "There's more. Carlo wants to talk to you. Says it's urgent." Derek's expression darkened. "Not now. He says it's about Russo, about the network." 30 minutes later, they sat in Derek's office oak desk, leather chairs, windows overlooking a city that looked cleaner from this height than it ever was at street level. Carlo, Derek's oldest lieutenant, stood near the window, his weathered face tight with concern. "You need to walk away from this," Carlo said without preamble. "Evan's connected now. Real connected. He's got cops on payroll, politicians in his pocket. You go after him, you're going after people who can make us all disappear. Then we disappear them first," Derek replied flatly. "This isn't strategy, Derek. This is personal." Carlo's gaze flicked to Tiffany, then back. "And personal gets people killed. He betrayed us once. You want to let him do it again?" "I want us to survive." Carlo's voice rose, frustration bleeding through years of loyalty. "He's not worth it. She's not." He stopped himself, but the damage was done. Tiffany stood abruptly, her chair scraping against hardwood. "I'll leave. I don't want anyone dying because of me. Sit down." Derek's command was soft but absolute. He kept his eyes on Carlo. "How long have we worked together?" 15 years. "And in 15 years, when have I ever walked away from unfinished business?" Carlo's jaw worked. "This is different." "No, it's exactly the same." Derek leaned forward, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "Evan used us. Used our roots, our trust, our people. Then he vanished and built an empire on our corpses. Now he's trafficking women, buying officials, and you want me to let that slide because it's inconvenient? I want you to think about what you're risking." "I know exactly what I'm risking." Derek's gaze shifted to Tiffany. "She came here for help, and I gave my word." Carlo shook his head slowly. Your word's gonna get us all killed. He left without waiting for dismissal, the door closing with a finality that felt like a warning. Tiffany remained standing, her hands trembling. He's right. I shouldn't have come here. I shouldn't have. Stop. Derek crossed to her in 3 strides. You did the only thing you could, and Carlo's wrong about one thing. What's that? This isn't just about you anymore. His voice carried the cold certainty of a man who'd already made his choice. It's about the debt Evan owes. And debts like that? They always get collected. The nightclub called Velvet Halo pulsed like a diseased heart in the city's east side. From the outside, it looked like every other high-end establishment: velvet ropes, beautiful people, bass that you felt in your chest before you heard it. But Vincent's surveillance photos told a different story. Derek spread them across his desk like tarot cards predicting violence. Side entrances that led nowhere on the blueprints. VIP rooms with soundproofing that cost more than the building itself. Luxury cars arriving at 3 a.m, staying for exactly 47 minutes, then leaving. The pattern's consistent, Vincent explained, pointing to timestamps. Every Tuesday and Friday. Same vehicles, same duration. Whatever's happening in those rooms, it's scheduled, professional. Tiffany leaned over Derek's shoulder, her breath catching when she recognized a face in one of the photos. That's Councilman Hayes. He gave a speech at my community center about protecting families. Yeah, well, his definition of protection's a little different. Vincent pulled up another image. That's Detective Morris, Narcotics Division. And that, he tapped a third photo, is Judge Brennan. The one who keeps throwing out trafficking cases on technicalities. Derek's silence was more terrifying than rage. He studied each face with the methodical precision of a man cataloging targets. The flash drive has timestamps that match these arrivals, Tiffany said quietly. Down to the minute. Evan kept records of everything. He called it insurance. Smart. Derek's voice was flat. Keep everyone dirty so no one can turn on you without burning themselves. So what do we do? Tiffany asked. If we leak this, they'll kill us before it reaches the press. Derek pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts until he found the name he needed. We don't leak it, we use it as leverage. I know someone who specializes in making powerful people very uncomfortable. He dialed. The conversation was brief, coded, and ended with coordinates and a time. 2 hours later, Derek's car pulled into an abandoned warehouse district where even the streetlights had given up. A single vehicle waited, a nondescript sedan that screamed federal agent trying not to look like a federal agent. The woman who emerged was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of exhaustion that came from swimming against institutional rot. She introduced herself only as Agent Chen. You said you had something that would interest me, she said, skipping pleasantries. Derek handed her a USB drive. Encrypted files. 3 years of transactions, names and video evidence linking city officials to a trafficking network operating out of Velvet Halo. Chen's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened on the drive. And you're giving me this because? Because I want Evan Russo buried so deep he never sees daylight. But I'm not stupid enough to think I can do it alone. Not when half the city's on his payroll. What do you want in return? Protection for her. Derek gestured to Tiffany. Witness protection if it comes to that. And immunity for anything on those files related to my organization. Chen almost smiled. You think you have that kind of leverage? I think you've been trying to build a case against Russo for 2 years and getting blocked at every level. I'm handing you the key. Derek's voice dropped. So yeah, I think I have leverage. Chen studied them both, weighing outcomes and risks. Finally, she pocketed the drive. I'll need 48 hours to verify this. If it's real, we can talk protection. But no immunity. Best I can do is selective prosecution. Good enough. They were back in the car, halfway to the penthouse, when Derek's phone rang. Vincent's voice came through tense, clipped. We've got a problem. Someone hit the garage. Car bomb. 2 men down. Derek's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. Who? Tony and Luca. Tony's dead. Luca's in surgery. Vincent paused. Message was clear, boss. They spray-painted the wall. Stay out of this. The car filled with terrible silence. Tiffany's voice was barely a whisper. This is my fault. No. Derek's response was immediate, razor sharp. This is Evan reminding us what kind of man he is. Like we needed the reminder. But those men knew the risks. Derek pulled over, turning to face her fully. His eyes were glacial, but beneath the ice something blazed. You think I didn't know this would cost blood? You think I thought we'd walk into his empire and he'd just surrender? He took a breath, forcing control back into his voice. Tony chose this life. So did Luca. So did I. This is what we do. We stand between monsters and the people they want to hurt, even when it kills us. I don't want anyone else dying for me, Tiffany said, tears finally breaking through. Then don't make their sacrifice meaningless. Derek's jaw set like concrete. We finish this. We burn his network to ash, and we make damn sure every person he's ever hurt knows that someone finally stood up. He pulled back onto the road, accelerating into the night. Behind them, sirens wailed, like ghosts mourning the dead. And somewhere in the city, Evan Russo smiled, believing he'd already won. The funeral was small. Rain fell like the city itself was mourning, drumming against black umbrellas and turning the cemetery into a landscape of mud and grief. Tony's wife stood at the graveside, her face a mask of controlled devastation, their 2 children clinging to her legs like anchors. Derek stood apart from the crowd, watching. He'd paid for everything: the casket, the plot, the college funds for the kids. Money couldn't resurrect the dead, but it was the only language he knew for apology. Tiffany stood beside him, her presence a reminder of why the grave was being dug in the first place. His daughter's 7, she whispered, watching the little girl with dark pigtails try to understand why her father wasn't coming home. Same age I was when my dad left, except hers didn't choose to go. Derek said nothing. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like justification. After the service, they returned to the penthouse. Derek's men were already gathering a war council forming in the living room. Maps of Evan's properties, surveillance photos, known associates, the machinery of retaliation grinding into motion. But Tiffany couldn't focus on the strategy. She kept seeing Carlo in the corner, his phone screen glowing as he typed something and quickly pocketed it. The gesture was subtle, practiced, the kind of motion someone makes when they've done it 100 times before. Her bookkeeper's instinct kicked in, the same instinct that had noticed Evan's discrepancies 3 years ago. Pattern recognition. Behavioral anomalies. She waited until the meeting dispersed, until Carlo headed toward the bathroom. Then she followed. The hallway was empty, elegant, lined with abstract art that probably cost more than most people's houses. Carlo's jacket hung on a hook outside the bathroom door, and Tiffany's hands moved before her conscience could stop them. The burner phone was in the inside pocket, still warm. Her fingers trembled as she opened the recent messages. The number was unlisted, but the texts were damning. Meeting at the penthouse tonight. Full crew. 9 p.m. He's planning something big. Wants to hit Velvet Halo directly. The girl's still with him. Access to everything. The bathroom door opened. Carlo froze, his eyes dropping to the phone in her hands. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. Then his expression shifted from shock to calculation to something like resignation. Give me the phone, Tiffany. You're feeding him information. Her voice shook, but she didn't back down. You told Evan where we'd be. The garage. Tony died because of you. You don't understand what you're looking at. I understand betrayal pretty well, actually. She held the phone up. How long? How long have you been selling Derek out? Carlo's jaw tightened. Since the moment you walked into that diner and made this personal, Evan offered me a way out, a clean exit with enough money to disappear. All I had to do was keep him informed. You got Tony killed for money? I got Tony killed trying to save the rest of us. Carlo's voice rose, cracking with something between guilt and desperation. Derek's walking us into a war we can't win. Evan's got the whole city in his pocket. Judges, cops, politicians, you saw the files. We're not taking down one man. We're taking on an entire system. And systems don't fall. They crush people stupid enough to fight them. So you just gave up? Decided to help the monster? I decided to survive. Carlo took a step closer. And you should too. Take the money Evan's offering and disappear. Derek's already dead, he just doesn't know it yet. And everyone standing beside him? We're all corpses waiting to drop. Tiffany's grip tightened on the phone. Derek trusted you. Derek's trust is a death sentence. Carlo's eyes softened slightly, almost pleading. I've followed him for 15 years, watched him make the hard calls, bury the bodies, carry the weight. And you know what I learned? Loyalty doesn't keep you warm when you're bleeding out in an alley. It just makes sure you die for someone else's cause. His cause is stopping Evan from hurting more people. His cause is redemption he'll never get. Carlo shook his head. You think saving you makes up for the things he's done? The people he's killed? Derek's not a hero, kid. He's just a different kind of monster. And monsters always destroy the things they try to protect. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. Derek appeared, his eyes moving from Tiffany to Carlo to the phone in her trembling hands. His expression didn't change, but the temperature in the hallway dropped 20 degrees. How long? Derek's voice was quiet, deadly. Carlo straightened, meeting his gaze. Long enough. Derek's hand moved to his waistband, but Tiffany stepped between them. Don't. Please. Just let him leave. He got Tony killed. And killing him brings Tony back? Tiffany's voice cracked. I've seen enough death. Please, Derek. Just let him go. Derek stared at Carlo with 15 years of history and partnership reflected in his eyes. Then, slowly, he lowered his hand. You've got 60 seconds to walk out that door. After that, if I ever see you again, I won't hesitate. Carlo nodded once. Then he turned and walked toward the elevator, each step echoing like a countdown. When the doors closed, Tiffany finally released the breath she'd been holding. Derek took the phone from her hands, scrolling through the messages. His expression remained carved from stone, but she saw his grip tighten until the screen cracked. He was right about one thing, Derek said quietly. What's that? This is a war we might not survive. 3 days passed in the penthouse like living inside a pressure cooker. Derek's men rotated shifts, turning the luxury apartment into a fortress. Vincent swept for bugs twice daily. Marco monitored traffic cameras. Every curtain stayed drawn. Tiffany felt like a ghost haunting someone else's life. She found Derek in his office past midnight, the glow from his laptop painting shadows across his face. Empty coffee cups surrounded him like casualties. He'd been cross-referencing the flash drive data with property records for hours, building a map of Evan's empire one connection at a time. You should sleep, she said from the doorway. So should you. She entered anyway, sinking into the leather chair across from him. I can't just hide here while you do everything. I need to help. Derek didn't look up from the screen. You've already helped. The drive, the information, isn't enough. Tiffany leaned forward, her voice urgent. I know how Evan operates. I know his patterns, his contacts, the way he structures deals. For 3 years, I was the one organizing his life. She paused, gathering courage. Let me use that against him. Derek's fingers stilled on the keyboard. What are you suggesting? There's someone. One of Derek's regular informants, a guy named Jimmy Torino who runs a pawn shop on 5th. He passes information to both sides, always playing the middle. Tiffany pulled out her own phone, showing Derek surveillance photos she'd taken from his files. He's also on Evan's payroll. I've seen the transactions. And he's meeting with Detective Morris tomorrow night. I saw it in the messages on Carlo's phone before you broke it. She met Derek's eyes. If we can record that meeting, get Morris on camera taking money from someone in Evan's network, we'll have proof the police are compromised. Agent Chen could use that. Agent Chen. Derek studied her, seeing something he hadn't noticed before. The trembling waitress who'd hidden under his table was gone. In her place sat someone harder, sharper. You understand what you're proposing? If they catch you recording, they'll kill me. I know. Tiffany's voice didn't waver. But they're going to try killing me anyway. At least this way. I'm fighting back. Derek was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. We do it smart. You wear a wire, but Vincent and I stay close. First sign of trouble, we extract you. Agreed. And Tiffany? Derek's gaze intensified. Once we do this, there's no pretending you're just a witness anymore. You become part of this, actively. I stopped being just a witness the moment I stole that drive. She smiled grimly. Besides, I'm tired of being the victim in my own story. The next night, Tiffany walked into Jimmy Torino's pawn shop, wearing a wire smaller than a dime, taped beneath her bra. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands stayed steady. The shop smelled like old electronics and desperation. Security cameras covered every angle, which meant Derek's team, parked in a van 2 blocks away, could see everything. Jimmy looked up from behind bulletproof glass, his weasel features tightening with recognition. You shouldn't be here. I need to talk about Evan, Tiffany said clearly, making sure the wire caught every word. I know you've been passing him information about Derek Cawley's movements. Jimmy's eyes darted to the cameras, then back. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Because I have bank records showing regular deposits from one of Evan's shell companies to your account. $5,000 every 2 weeks. Payment for services rendered. She was bluffing the records existed, but she hadn't brought them. Her bookkeeper instincts supplied the details with enough confidence to sound real. Jimmy's face paled. You're wearing a wire. Smart guess. You stupid. He reached for something under the counter. The back door burst open. Detective Morris entered, his police jacket unzipped, irritation carved into his features. Jimmy, what the hell is... He stopped cold, seeing Tiffany. Perfect timing. Detective Morris. Tiffany kept her voice level, letting the wire capture everything. I didn't know you made house calls to pawn shops at midnight. Morris's hand drifted toward his service weapon. Miss, I'm going to need you to leave. Police business. Funny. I thought accepting bribes from criminal organizations wasn't standard police business. Or is that a new policy? She watched his expression shift from confusion to fury to calculation. How much is Evan paying you to look the other way? More than Jimmy gets, I hope. You're taking a bigger risk. You don't know what you're doing, Morris said, his voice low and dangerous. I know exactly what I'm doing. Tiffany pulled out her phone, showing them the screen a live stream connecting to Agent Chen's secure server. And so does the FBI. Smile, detective. You're being recorded by more than just me. Morris lunged forward, but the shop's front window exploded inward. Derek and Vincent came through like avenging angels, weapons drawn, moving with the brutal efficiency of men who'd done this 1,000 times. Hands where I can see them, Derek ordered, his gun trained on Morris. The detective froze, weighing options. Then, slowly, he raised his hands. 2 hours later, back at the penthouse, Tiffany sat on the balcony wrapped in a blanket, adrenaline finally fading into exhaustion. Derek joined her, 2 glasses of whiskey in hand. That was reckless, he said, offering her a glass. That was necessary. She took a sip, the burn grounding her. Did Chen get the footage? Every frame. Morris is already in federal custody. Jimmy's talking in exchange for protection. Derek looked at her with something that might have been admiration. You did good. I did what you taught me. What's that? That sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is stop being afraid. Derek smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. You're starting to sound like me. God help us both. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights blur in the distance. For the first time since she'd crawled under that table, Tiffany felt like she wasn't just surviving. She was winning. The warehouse on Pier 9 had been abandoned for 3 years, rusting quietly into the harbor like a beached ship. Vincent had chosen it specifically isolated, multiple exits, clear sightlines. The meeting with Agent Chen's task force was supposed to be routine. Hand over additional evidence, coordinate next steps, establish timeline for Evan's takedown. Derek should have known better than to trust routine. They arrived at dawn, when the sky was still gray and uncertain. Derek, Vincent, Marco, and 2 others, a skeleton crew. Tiffany had insisted on coming despite Derek's protests. I'm the one who knows the financial structure, she'd argued. They'll need me to walk them through the accounts. Now, standing in the cavernous space with morning light bleeding through broken windows, Derek's instincts screamed danger. The task force was late. 15 minutes. Then 30. Something's wrong, Vincent muttered, hand resting on his concealed weapon. Derek's phone buzzed. Unknown number, he answered. Hello, Derek. Evan's voice was silk and venom. I believe you have something of mine. Derek's blood turned to ice. How did you... Carlo, please. He was useful but obvious. Evan's laugh was cold. You should have killed him when you had the chance. Before he told me everything, including where you'd be this morning. The line went dead. Derek spun toward Tiffany. Get down. The first bullet shattered a window. Then the world exploded into chaos. Gunfire erupted from elevated positions, the catwalks, the loading platforms, every high point. Professional, coordinated, at least 8 shooters, maybe more. Derek's men returned fire, but they were exposed, outgunned. Marco took a round to the shoulder and went down hard. Vincent dragged him behind a concrete pillar, cursing. Derek grabbed Tiffany, covering her body with his as bullets sparked off metal around them. Stay low. Move when I move. They scrambled toward a stack of shipping containers, using them for cover. Derek's mind raced, calculating angles, counting shooters, measuring survival odds, all of them grim. Another volley tore through their position. One of Derek's men, Tommy, screamed once and went silent. "We're pinned," Vincent shouted over the gunfire. "They've got every exit covered." Derek's jaw tightened. This wasn't a random hit. This was execution, carefully planned. And Carlo's betrayal had set the stage. Tiffany's hands shook as she pressed herself against the container. "This is my fault. I should never have." "Not now," Derek cut her off. He keyed his radio. "Marco, can you move?" Shoulders torn up, but yeah. "There's a drainage tunnel 30 yards east. We make a run. We might—" A new sound cut through the gunfire. A vehicle approaching fast. Black SUV, ramming through the warehouse's side entrance like a battering ram. It skidded to a stop, and the door opened. Carlo stepped out. For one crystalline second, Derek thought he'd come to help. Then he saw the man beside Carlo, Evan Russo, immaculate in a gray suit, flanked by 4 armed contractors. "Stop firing," Evan called out calmly. The shooting ceased immediately, leaving only ringing silence and the smell of cordite. Evan walked forward slowly, shoes clicking on concrete. Carlo trailing behind like a shadow filled with regret. Derek Cawley, the ghost who wouldn't stay buried. Evan's smile was a knife dressed in charm. "You should have taken the hint with the car bomb. Should have walked away." "Where's Agent Chen?" Derek demanded, still shielding Tiffany. "Federal custody, along with her entire task force." Evan's smile widened. "Turns out when you have a federal judge in your pocket, you can make pesky investigations disappear." Chen's computer was mysteriously filled with fabricated evidence. Career suicide. Tragic, really. Derek's grip on his weapon tightened. "You can't buy everyone." "No, but I can buy enough." Evan's gaze shifted to Tiffany, his expression darkening. "Hello, baby. Miss me?" Tiffany stood slowly, Derek's hand on her arm trying to hold her back. But she shook him off, stepping into view. "You're going to lose, Evan. Even if you kill us, the evidence is already out there. Evidence that's been thoroughly discredited by federal investigators." Evan skecked. Poor Agent Chen, building a case on falsified documents. Conspiracy theories. No one will believe anything tied to her now. Carlo stepped forward, his face ashen. "Evan, you said if I gave you the location, you'd let them walk away." "I said a lot of things." Evan didn't even look at him. "Just like you said a lot of things to Derek for 15 years. We're all liars here." Evan didn't even. He raised his hand, and his contractors lifted their weapons. Derek pushed Tiffany behind him, weapon raised, knowing it was futile. They were surrounded, outgunned, out of options. This was how it ended. Not in glory, but in a rusted warehouse with morning light streaming through bullet holes. Then Carlo moved. He drew the pistol Derek hadn't taken from him 3 days ago, the mercy that was supposed to mean exile, not redemption, and fired 3 times in rapid succession. 2 of Evan's contractors dropped. The 3rd took cover. Chaos erupted again. "Go!" Carlo screamed at Derek. "The tunnel! Now!" Derek didn't hesitate. He grabbed Tiffany and ran, Vincent hauling Marco along beside them. Gunfire exploded behind them, Carlo's final stand buying seconds they didn't deserve. They hit the drainage tunnel as bullets sparked off the entrance. The darkness swallowed them, echoes of violence chasing them through the black. Behind them, Carlo's gun clicked empty. There was a single shot, then silence. They emerged 3 blocks away, gasping, covered in grime and blood that wasn't all theirs. Marco's shoulder bled freely. Vincent's face was carved with fury and grief, but they were alive. Tiffany collapsed against a wall, shaking uncontrollably. "Carlo, he saved us. After everything, he remembered who he was," Derek said quietly, staring back toward the warehouse. "In the end, that's all any of us can do." Vincent's radio crackled. A voice Derek didn't recognize. "Cawley? Agent Maria Santos, FBI. Chen briefed me before they took her. I've got your evidence, all of it, and I'm not on Evan's payroll. If you're still breathing, we need to talk. Now." Derek met Tiffany's eyes. They were battered, hunted, pushed to the edge, but the war wasn't over. "Where?" Derek said into the radio. Santos gave coordinates, a safe house, federal protection, or another trap. Either way, they had no choice but to walk into it. The rain returned on a Tuesday, exactly 6 weeks after the warehouse bloodbath. It hammered the diner's tin roof like impatient fists, turning the parking lot into a mirror of broken neon. Inside, the smell of fresh paint mixed with old grease Sally had finally retired, and the new owner had scrubbed the place until it gleamed. But the checkered floor still carried ghosts. A faint boot print of espresso from that first night, a scar in the vinyl where a bullet had ricocheted. Derek sat in the same corner booth, newspaper folded to the racing section he never read. His coffee steamed untouched. Vincent stood by the jukebox, pretending to study song titles. Marco nursed a soda at the counter, shoulders still in a sling. 2 more men lingered outside under umbrellas, watching the street like hawks. They weren't here for pancakes. Tiffany moved behind the counter in a crisp white apron, hair pulled back, hands steady as she refilled salt shakers. She'd insisted on reopening the diner herself, said the place had saved her once, and now she'd return the favor. Derek had argued until his voice cracked. She'd won with 3 words. My turn. The bell above the door jingled at 11:47 p.m. Evan Russo stepped in first, rain dripping from his cashmere coat. The tailored suit beneath was new, but the arrogance was vintage. A fresh scar ran from his left ear to jaw courtesy of the warehouse glass Tiffany had shattered across his face. 4 men followed, spreading out with practiced menace. The diner's 3 late-night customers, a trucker, a nurse, an insomniac poet froze mid-bite. Evan's smile was a razor dipped in honey. Evening, folks. We're closed for a private party. The trucker reached for his wallet. I'll just sit, Evan said softly. The man sat. Tiffany's hand slipped beneath the counter, fingers brushing the panic button Derek had installed. She didn't press it. Not yet. Evan's gaze found Derek. You always did like this dump. Sentimental. Derek folded the newspaper with deliberate calm. You always did like entrances. Subtlety's not your color. Evan's men fanned wider. One locked the door. Another flipped the open sign to closed. The neon buzzed, flickered, steadied. Tiffany stepped out from behind the counter, apron strings knotted tight. You're bleeding on my floor. Evan glanced down rainwater mixed with a thin line of crimson from the healing scar. Your floor? Cute. Last I checked, this place belonged to the city health code violations. It belongs to me now. Her voice didn't shake. Paid in full. You're trespassing. Evan laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut glass. You think a deed stops me? I own judges, sweetheart. I own the DA who'll bury your little assault charge. I own the cops who'll swear you attacked me first. He took a step closer. I own you. Derek rose slowly, chair scraping like a warning. You own nothing here. The room temperature plummeted. Vincent's hand drifted inside his jacket. Marco set his soda down with a click that echoed like a round chambered. Evan's smile thinned. Still playing hero? Collie? How many men have to die before you learn the game's rigged? None tonight, Derek said. Because you're not walking out with her. Evan snapped his fingers. His men drew Glocks, suppressors glinting under fluorescent light. Derek's crew answered in kind. 6 guns on 6 guns. The trucker whimpered. The nurse dropped her fork. Tiffany's heart hammered so hard she tasted metal. She'd rehearsed this moment in nightmares. Evan's smirk, the smell of gun oil, the way fear used to paralyze her. But tonight, fear had company rage, bright and molten. She pressed the panic button. Outside, sirens wailed to life distant, then closer, then deafening. Red and blue lights painted the windows like war paint. Evan's composure cracked. What did you? Federal task force, Tiffany said, stepping into the open. Agent Santos sends her regards. Your judge? Arrested an hour ago. Your DA? Singing to the FBI. Your cops? Wearing wires? She smiled, small and fierce. Turns out, when you spread corruption thin enough, someone always flips. Evan's face twisted. You lying? Check your phone, Derek said. Evan fumbled for it. The screen lit with headlines FBI raids Velvet Hollow, corrupt officials in custody. Evan Russo wanted. The diner door rattled, locked. Evan's men shifted, uncertain. One glanced at the exit. Another looked at Evan like he was suddenly radioactive. Derek took a step forward. Your empire's ash. Your protection's gone. You've got 1 play left. Evan's gun came up fast, aimed at Tiffany's chest. Then I take her with me. Time slowed. Tiffany saw the tremor in Evan's wrist, the first crack in the facade. She saw Derek's finger tighten on his trigger. She saw Vincent calculating angles, Marco bracing his bad shoulder. She saw the booth where she'd hidden, terrified, 6 weeks ago, and she moved. Tiffany dove left, shoulder rolling across the counter as Evan fired. The bullet shattered the coffee machine behind her, steam hissing like a dragon's dying breath. Derek's shot answered a heartbeat later center mass. Evan staggered, blood blooming dark across his white shirt. Chaos erupted. Evan's men opened fire. Derek's returned it. The diner became a thunderstorm of muzzle flashes and splintered wood. The jukebox exploded in a shower of vinyl and sparks. The trucker screamed, crawling under a table. The nurse dragged the poet with her. Tiffany scrambled on her belly, glass crunching beneath her palms. She reached her booth, and yanked open the underside panel Derek had reinforced weeks ago. Inside, a sawed-off shotgun, loaded with beanbag rounds. Non-lethal. Symbolic. She rose like a phoenix from the ashes of her old life. Enough! Her voice cut through the gunfire, raw but unbroken. She racked the shotgun. The sound was thunder in miniature. Every gun swiveled toward her. Evan clutched his side, blood seeping between his fingers. Tiffany, shut up. She leveled the barrel at his chest. You don't get to say my name anymore. Sirens screamed closer. Tires screeched outside. FBI vests poured through the unlocked side door. Santos in the lead, weapon drawn. Federal agents. Drop them. Evan's remaining men hesitated, then lowered their weapons. Derek's followed suit. The diner fell into stunned silence, broken only by the hiss of steam and the drip of blood on tile. Santos cuffed Evan herself, reading him his rights like a lullaby. He stared at Tiffany the entire time, betrayal and disbelief warring in his eyes. You set me up, he rasped. No, Tiffany said. I stopped letting you. Derek crossed the wreckage, boots crunching glass. He stopped beside the booth where it all began. Evan lay crumpled against it, breathing shallow. The flash drive Tiffany had stolen now taped to his chest like a scarlet letter. Derek crouched, voice low. You die in court, not in my diner. Evan tried to laugh, but it came out a wet cough. You think this ends me? It ends what you built, Derek said. The rest is just paperwork. FBI agents hauled Evan up. He sagged between them, leaving a smear of blood on the vinyl. As they dragged him past Tiffany, he whispered, You'll always be mine. She met his eyes cold, unafraid. I was never yours. I was just waiting for the right moment to leave. The door swung shut behind him. The rain kept falling. Tiffany's knees buckled. Derek caught her before she hit the floor, his arms steady where the world wasn't. She buried her face in his shoulder, breathing in leather and gunpowder and safety. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Inside, the diner looked like a war zone, but the war was over. Vincent clapped Marco on the back, grinning through blood on his teeth. The trucker emerged from under the table, blinking like he'd woken from a nightmare. The nurse helped the poet to his feet, both of them staring at Tiffany like she was a miracle. Derek eased her onto the booth bench, the same one she'd hidden beneath. He knelt, brushing glass from her hair. You okay? He asked. She looked around at the shattered windows, the bullet holes, the blood on the floor that wasn't hers. Then at the flash drive now in evidence bags, the cuffs on Evan's wrists visible through the window. I'm free, she whispered. Derek's hand cupped her cheek, thumb tracing the bruise that had finally faded. Then let's go home. But Tiffany shook her head. This is home. She stood, legs shaky but sure, and faced the wreckage. The neon sign flickered once, twice, then steadied open. Because some things, once broken, get rebuilt stronger. The diner smelled of bleach and burnt sugar at 317 A.M. The FBI had left an hour ago, taking Evan in an ambulance under armed guard. Yellow tape crisscrossed the doorway like cautionary stitches. Outside, news vans circled, reporters shouting questions into the rain. Inside, only the hum of the freezer and the drip of a broken faucet remained. Tiffany sat on the counter, legs dangling, apron soaked with coffee and someone else's blood. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Derek knelt among the wreckage, picking shards of glass from the floor with the patience of a man defusing a bomb. Vincent and Marco had gone to check the perimeter. The silence between them felt sacred. Derek dropped a final sliver into a trash bag, then looked up. You should go home. This is home, she said again, softer this time. The words tasted like truth and grief. He stood, wiping his hands on a rag that used to be white. Blood streaked his knuckles. Evan's, his own, maybe both. He crossed to her, slow, like approaching a wounded animal. When he reached the counter, he didn't touch her. Just stood close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him. You're shaking, he said. I'm supposed to be. Her laugh cracked. I just shot at the man who owned my nightmares for 3 years, and he bled on my floor. Derek's eyes flicked to the booth, now a crime scene outline in tape. He bled because you stopped letting him own you. Tiffany slid off the counter, bare feet on cold tile. She walked to the booth and sat where she'd hidden that first night. The vinyl was torn, stuffing spilling like guts. She traced the bullet hole with one finger. I used to pray here, she whispered. Under the table. Begged God, the universe, anyone, please don't let him find me. She looked at Derek. You answered instead. He stayed standing, hands at his sides. I answered because I recognized the prayer. Said it myself once. Tiffany's breath hitched. When? Long time ago. His voice was gravel over glass. I was 12. My father sold me to a crew for a debt. Told me it was temporary. 3 years later I was running numbers, breaking knees, learning that family's just another word for leverage. He met her eyes. No one came for me, so I became the one who comes. The confession hung between them, raw and unguarded. Tiffany felt the weight of it settle in her chest, his past mirroring hers in ways she hadn't expected. I tried to kill myself, she said suddenly. The words tumbled out before shame could stop them. 2nd year with Evan. He'd locked me in the penthouse for a week. No food, just water, and his voice telling me I was nothing without him. I found pills in the bathroom. Took 20. Woke up in the ER with him holding my hand, crying like he cared. She swallowed. He told the doctors I was unstable. Got me committed for 72 hours. When I came home, he'd replaced every mirror so I couldn't see what he'd done to me. Derek's jaw flexed. He took one step closer, then stopped like touching her might break something sacred. I'm sorry, he said. The apology was simple, devastating. Don't be. Tiffany stood, closing the distance herself. You gave me a mirror tonight, showed me I'm not the girl who hides anymore. She reached for his hand. He let her take it. His palm was calloused, warm, steady. She turned it over, tracing the tattooed knuckles, loyalty inked in Old English, a skull wearing a crown. You don't owe him your pain anymore, he said, echoing her earlier thought. You owe yourself peace. The tears came then silent, unstoppable. Not the frantic sobs of fear, but the slow release of a dam finally cracking. Derek didn't move to wipe them away. He just held her gaze, letting her cry without audience or judgment. When the storm passed, she leaned her forehead against his chest. He smelled like gunpowder and rain, and something that felt like safety. His arms came around her, hesitant at first, then fierce, like he'd been waiting years to hold something that wouldn't break. I'm turning myself in tomorrow, he said into her hair. Tiffany pulled back, startled. What? Old charges, tied to Evan's network. Murder for hire, racketeering stuff I did before I built walls around the worst parts. His voice was steady, resolved. Santos offered a deal. Full testimony, evidence on the bigger fish. In exchange, they bury the bodies I can't resurrect. You'll go to prison. Maybe. Probably. But the network dies with me on the stand. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. And you walk free. No more looking over your shoulder. Tiffany's throat closed. You're doing this for me? I'm doing it because it's right. A ghost of a smile. And because someone has to finish what you started. She wanted to argue, scream that he didn't owe the world atonement, that redemption wasn't a sacrifice. But the look in his eyes stopped her. This wasn't guilt, it was choice. I'll wait, she said. Don't. He cupped her face. Live. Open the diner. Help the next girl who runs in here bleeding. Be the person I couldn't be at 12. The bell jingled. Agent Santos stepped inside, rain dripping from her coat. Time's up, Collie. Transport's outside. Derek nodded. He released Tiffany, but she caught his sleeve. One thing, she said. She reached into her apron, the same one with the torn hem, and pulled out a small key. The key to the diner. She pressed it into his palm, closing his fingers around it. When you get out, she whispered. Your booth's waiting. Coffee's on me. His eyes glistened, something Tiffany had never seen. He slipped the key into his pocket like it was made of gold. Santos cuffed him gently, almost respectfully. As they led him out, he didn't look back. Didn't need to. The weight of his promise stayed behind, warm in the air. Tiffany watched the door close. Then she turned to the wreckage and started cleaning. She swept glass into piles, leery eyes. They ate in silence, passing a flask of something strong. When the sun rose, pale and hesitant, Tiffany unlocked the door and flipped the sign to open. The first customer was the nurse from the shootout. She ordered coffee, black, and left $100 tip with a note. For the girl who saved us all. By noon, the place was packed cops, reporters, locals drawn by the news. Tiffany moved between tables with steady hands, refilling mugs, taking orders, smiling like she'd been born to it. No one saw the tremor when she passed the booth. No one saw her pause to touch the key-shaped indent in her apron pocket. That night, she closed alone. She locked the door, turned off the neon, and sat in Derek's booth with a single cup of coffee cooling between her palms. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of echoes, of choices, of a future she could finally shape. She raised the cup in a quiet toast. To peace, she said. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city smelled clean for the first time in years. 18 months later, the diner's neon sign glowed steady pink against a dawn sky the color of fresh bruises. The parking lot was empty except for a single black sedan idling across the street, engine off, driver invisible behind tinted glass. Inside, the place smelled of bacon and lemon polish. The jukebox, repaired with parts salvaged from 3 different decades, played Billie Holiday low enough to feel like a heartbeat. Tiffany Marrero, now 27, moved between booths in a crisp white shirt and jeans, no apron. Her name was on the deed, the health permit, the bank loan inked in her own steady hand. The bruises had faded to memory. The only mark left was a thin scar on her left palm, where Evan's glass had sliced her the night she broke free. She set a plate in front of Mrs. Alvarez, the gray-haired regular who'd been coming since Sally's days. Extra crispy, just like you like. Mrs. Alvarez patted her wrist. You're a miracle, mija. This place was dead. Now it's family. Tiffany smiled real, wide, unforced. She'd heard the word miracle a lot lately. From the city council, when they gave her a community service award. From the support group she hosted every Thursday for women who'd escaped worse than she had. From the headlines that still called her the waitress who took down a kingpin. She didn't correct them. Truth was messier, but it was hers. At 6:03 a.m., the bell jingled. A young woman stumbled in, 19, maybe 20, soaked from the rain that had rolled in overnight. Her hoodie was torn at the sleeve, one eye swelling shut. She clutched a duffel like it held her entire life. Tiffany's heart stuttered. She knew the look, knew the tremor in the girl's hands, the way she scanned exits before breathing. Hey, Tiffany said softly, meeting her halfway. You're safe here. The girl's knees buckled. Tiffany caught her, guiding her to the corner booth, the same one where everything had begun and ended. She poured coffee without asking, slid it across the table with 2 sugars and a kindness that didn't demand answers. I'm Mia, the girl whispered after a minute. He said if I left, he'd find me, that no one would believe me. Tiffany sat opposite her, folding her hands like Derek once had. He's wrong. You're here. That's the first truth. The rest we'll handle together. Mia's tears fell into the coffee, rippling the surface. I don't have anywhere to go. You do now. Tiffany reached under the table, her table, and pressed a small brass key into Mia's palm. Upstairs apartment. Locks new. Showers hot. Sleep as long as you need. Mia stared at the key like it was a lifeline. Why are you helping me? Tiffany glanced out the window. The black sedan was still there, a shadow keeping watch. Because someone helped me once, and I promised I'd pay it forward. The morning rush began. Truckers, nurses changing shifts, a cop who nodded respectfully instead of suspiciously. Tiffany moved through it with practiced grace, refilling mugs, taking orders, laughing at bad jokes. The diner had become a sanctuary, word spread in whispers. If you were running, bleeding, or just done being afraid, the neon sign meant open arms. At 8:47 a.m., the bell jingled again. This time, the man who entered wore a cheap suit and a tired smile. His hair was shorter, grayer at the temples. The tattoo on his knuckles had faded, but the skull still wore its crown. Derek Cawley? The diner fell quiet. Mrs. Alvarez gasped. The cop stood halfway out of his booth. Tiffany froze with a coffee pot in mid-pour, steam curling between them like a question. Derek's eyes, still winter ice, but softer now, found hers across the room. He raised both hands, palms open. I come in peace, and hungry. Tiffany set the pot down with shaking hands. She crossed the floor slowly, afraid he'd vanish if she moved too fast. When she reached him, She stopped an arm's length away. "You're out," she said. "Time off for testimony that buried 37 people." His voice was rougher, like prison gravel had worked its way in. "Judge called it extraordinary cooperation. I call it Tuesday." Tiffany laughed wet, stunned, joyful. "You look terrible. You look like freedom." He glanced around at the polished booths, the chalkboard menu, the jar labeled college fund from IA. "You did it." "We did it." She stepped closer. Booths waiting. He slid into his old spot like he'd never left. Tiffany poured coffee black, no sugar, and sat across from him. For a long moment, they just looked. 18 months of letters smuggled through lawyers, of courtrooms and confessions, of nights she'd fallen asleep clutching the key he'd returned in an evidence bag. "You kept it," he said, nodding at the brass key now, on a chain around her neck. "Never took it off." She touched it. Figured it was half the promise. Derek wrapped his hands around the mug, warming them. "Heard you turned this place into a halfway house for runaways." "Safe house," she corrected. "Difference is, they leave when they're ready, not when someone says they can." He nodded, pride flickering in his eyes. "Evan?" "Life without parole. Velvet Halo's a community center now. Kids learn coding where he used to." She stopped, shrugged. "You know." "Yeah." Derek sipped the coffee, winced. "Still terrible. Some things don't change." She leaned forward. "What about you?" "Parole board says I'm a reformed community asset. Got a job offer security consulting for nonprofits. Legit." He smirked. "Turns out monsters make good bodyguards when they switch sides." Tiffany studied him, the lines around his eyes, the way he held himself looser, like the weight had shifted instead of vanished. "You staying?" "Thought I'd ask the owner if she's hiring dishwashers." His voice dropped. "Or if the booth comes with permanent residency." Outside, the black sedan pulled away, Vincent's signal that the watch was over. Derek was home. Tiffany reached across the table, lacing her fingers through his. "Booth's yours. Coffee's free. But you're on probation. Burn the toast. You're out." He laughed. The sound startled a toddler at the next table into giggles. "Deal." The morning light slanted through the windows, painting them gold. Mia emerged from the kitchen in one of Tiffany's old aprons, shyly taking her first order. "Mrs. Alvarez snapped a photo for the local paper. Mafia boss turned reformed hero returns to diner that saved him." Derek didn't notice. He was too busy watching Tiffany watch Mia, the way her eyes shone with something fiercer than happiness purpose. Later, when the rush slowed, Tiffany locked the door and flipped the sign to close it. She led Derek upstairs to the apartment above the diner, now split into 2 small units, one for staff, one for guests. The original key still fit the original lock. Inside, the space was simple white walls, secondhand furniture, a window overlooking the parking lot. On the sill sat a single framed photo. The 2 of them outside the courthouse, the day Evan was sentenced. Arms around each other, rain in their hair, victory in their eyes. Derek picked it up. "Never thought I'd see this." "Proof," Tiffany said, "that monsters can choose mercy, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is let someone save them." He set the frame down, turned to her. "I'm not here to save you anymore." "Good." She stepped into his arms. "I'm here to save you right back." Their kiss was slow, deliberate, like sealing a vow neither had spoken aloud. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city hummed with morning traffic, oblivious to the quiet revolution happening under neon lights. Years later, travelers would swear the diner's coffee tasted like second chances. They'd never know the full story, just that the waitress smiled like she'd outrun hell, and the quiet man in the corner booth watched her like she'd hung the moon. But Mia would know, and the girl who came after her, and the one after that, because some roads don't belong to the powerful, they belong to the brave. Thanks for sticking with this story till the end. If you enjoyed it, you're going to love the next one. It's packed with unexpected turns and heartfelt moments. Click the image on your screen to keep the journey going, and make sure to hit subscribe for more amazing stories. Drop a comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I can't wait to see what you think.